Hey, welcome to Q&A, where you ask your questions on faith and life, and I do my best to give a biblical perspective. My apologies for not having responded recently. It's just I've been working through some health issues and just haven't really been in a position to answer it. But here we are, so let's jump into today's question. If you don't believe in infant baptism, what happens to a child who dies before they can accept Jesus for themselves? And that's a great question. It sort of, I'm guessing, follows on a recent Q&A where we talked about baptism and do we believe, or why don't we believe in infant baptism? Can I just say right off the bat that if this is your question, I hear the Pastoral Heart, and I just want to acknowledge that, because this really is a pastoral question. You know, so often I've come up against this in my own personal experience in ministry, where somebody has lost a baby through stillbirth or sudden infant death syndrome. A child has been tragically taken from them through illness or through accident, whatever. And maybe you've been there, or maybe you know someone who is, and you want to offer hope. And I totally get that, because I've certainly been through that myself. So can I just say that right from the outset that we want to separate this issue from baptism, because baptism is not a means of grace. I believe, unlike the Catholic Church and some others, that baptism is not a means of grace where if you need to be baptized in order to be saved, and they baptize infants believing that will set them on a path of being saved. I don't see that in Scripture. What I see in Scripture is that baptism is an outward sign of our faith, where we are publicly making a statement that we are dead to sin, we are dead to self, we're dead to the world, we've been born again. And so we come out of the water, it's a statement of that whole process of being born again. It's in no way salvific in and of itself. John 14 verse 6, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me." It's not baptism that saves us. It's our belief, our faith in Jesus Christ that saves us. So what happens to infants incapable of expressing a faith? Well, if you got to go back, in my view, to the Old Testament, because so much of what we take for granted in the New is cradled in the Old. And I can think of a couple of examples in the Old Testament, for example, where we see infants who have died, and we get some insights into how we might begin to approach this topic. For example, there's in the story of David and Bathsheba, where he sins against God by taking the wife of one of his generals, who's off fighting and defending his land. He sleeps with his wife, and she conceives. God holds him to account for that, and the baby gets terribly sick. And he's busy fasting that God would spare this child. The child dies, and what happens is no one's willing to go and see him, because they think he's going to get really angry and really emotional about it. They break the news, and he doesn't flip out. And we read in 2 Samuel chapter 12 where they go to him and say, you know, what's with that? And he says in verse 23, "But why should I fast when he's dead? Can I bring him back again? No, but one day I will go to be with him, but he cannot come to me." So there's this understanding in David, who is not a perfect man, but is a man after God's own heart. He has faith that his child is with God, and one day he will go to be with God himself, and there he will see him. So there's this sort of awareness that children, and people who are young, can't make decisions for themselves, infants, that God has somehow takes them to himself. And again, we see that in Jeremiah, where God is condemning the Israelites because they've turned away from worshiping God. They've turned to idols, and in fact, they've become entertained some really barbaric, horrific practices of child sacrifice to a Moabite god, Molech, and God condemns them throughout Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 7, Jeremiah 32, 33, and in Jeremiah 19. And in fact, in Jeremiah 19, God speaking through Jeremiah in regards to this, he refers to these children who've been sacrificed as innocent. And the word we translate innocent has to do with free from guilt. The implication being that they're not condemned, even though they they have not made sacrifice for their sins, all those sorts of things. And so there's this concept that a child of innocence, a child who cannot make a response to God, is somehow taken by God to be with himself, that he stands in for them in some way. And we see this in Matthew, where in chapter 19, where people are bringing their children to Jesus to be blessed. And the disciples are turning them away, and Jesus rebukes them. And he says, don't stop them. Let the children come to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like these children. In other words, he's saying that the very thing that you as an adult long for through me, they already have it in me. And it's like, because of their innocence, because of their age where they're unable to respond to me, because I fearfully and wonderfully made them, I hold them. And so therefore they already have at this point in their life what you can't have except through me. And it raises this whole question of the age of accountability. And the Bible doesn't go into that, and I'm not going to go into that either. But what it points to is that little infants, little children who are incapable of discerning the things of God in the way that we would say is saving, but God somehow holds them to himself in ways that we should just rejoice in rather than try and unpack deeply, if I could describe it that way. So to answer your question, what happens to infants who die in innocence or who die outside of the saving knowledge of Jesus? I think Jesus stands in for them before the throne of judgment, just as he stands for you and me. You and I enter into that knowingly through confession of sin, through being born again. Jesus takes the initiative with infants. So pastorally, I think you can have confidence in reassuring them that their children are safe in the arms of God, and that for those who follow Jesus, they will be reconciled, reunited with them in heaven in some way. So yeah, I hope that gives you some guidance that answers your question. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But hey, as always, if you've got questions about faith and life, just jump over to slido.com, use the hashtag ALC24. Love to hear from you. But that's it for now. Until next time, God bless.